This is Liana Suantak, and I invite you to join me on the road to Tamdayang. This is Burma in Southeast Asia, between India and Thailand. We'll be going to Chin State on the northwest side of the country. Here's a picture of my father and his siblings. My father's one son holding his youngest brother, Nochintong, or as I would call him, Pano, which means uncle. His sister Vong Kai, who's still alive and living in Kalemio, Chin Zadal, who's living in Tamdayang, and Lian Kup, who lives in Rangoon. In about 1963, my father was selected to do his PhD in East Germany in geology. This is where he met my mother and then had me, the baby, and my sister. When his student visa expired, we had to go back to Burma. Here I am being held by my grandmother and with my uncle Tong next to us. This picture is of my grandfather in the back, my mother in the front, my grandmother holding me again, and all of my grandfather's sisters surrounding us. We had to leave Burma and eventually ended up in West Germany. And in 1978 moved to the US for my father's job. My father wrote a book in 1986 called Zoohistory. This is an important detail for the rest of the story. So I live in Tucson now, and I started my trip on November 19th at 3:30 a.m., taking the shuttle to Phoenix. I stopped over in Seattle and got this nice picture of Mount Rainier. This is the bibimbap you get on Korean Airlines, which I highly recommend. I finally arrived in Rangoon on November 20th at 10 a.m. Arizona time after 31 hours of traveling. Here's the hotel at the Lotus Bed and Breakfast, which was very comfortable. I got a family room. Here's a picture of the toilet. Notice the sprayer. On the other side is the shower, which just sprays into the toilet area, making it a wet toilet. Here's the air conditioner and fan that's controlled on the side of the room. The next morning we had breakfast with my uncle Pano and Nuno, my aunt, and also Michael Swantuck and a friend of my uncle's from college. I had the rice noodle breakfast, which was delicious. And here's a double speed picture of the streets in Rangoon to give an impression of how that looks like. There's still lots of tea shops and also new buildings. The buses are now very reliable, so I was told, which is a new thing. Notice that both men and women wear skirts, which are called longjis, and which are very comfortable in the tropical heat. Lots of signs of the British still here, like that Salvation Army on old buildings. This is a market and another church. There's lots of religions represented. There's this Hindu temple, there's Muslims called to prayers, and also church bells. Very multicultural. Here we are on our way to the Shwedagon Paya. As we get further outside of Rangoon, you can see more lush gardens and green. Here's the front of the pagoda. You can see that there's some construction being done on the facade. I like this sign because it says no drones over the pagoda, so some contrast between old and new here. As you go in, there's sort of a mall area, which is a place to shop for little trinkets. I didn't see much to buy here. And then you come to the main area, which is full of pagodas and is still being added to and also refurbished. You can see there's some people walking with umbrellas. It was very hot this day. And here are some pagodas that are being redone with bamboo scaffolding on them. This is the walk out of the pagoda, and there's a beautiful view of Rangoon. Next we stopped at the Bojok market. Bojok means general. That's for General Aung San, who was the leader of Burma when they got independence from the British. This is the old market. This was called Scott Market in the past. Here's some shops where they do sewing. You can see the old Singer machines in there, very chaotic and in disarray. This is my cousin's Chin shop of textiles. She also sells Karen textiles, and she's doing very well. Her daughter has a shop down the street. This is the view from the market, outside of the market. There's many beautiful paintings that are sold, many talented artists. In this shop, they're cutting and polishing precious stones, which are abundant in Burma. Here's a new mall, Junction City Mall, that is built across the street from, of course, here's a toilet, from Bojok Market, movie theater, food court. You feel like you're stepping into America. This was my lunch, Indonesian. Next, we went to the Aung San, Bojok Aung San Museum. Again, he was the leader of Burma and was assassinated in 1947, which led to the military taking over. His daughter, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, spent 20 years under house arrest for democracy, and here she is now a member of parliament. And she met President Obama a few years ago. There's a like most museums and visitor tourist places, there's a foreigner fee with 5,000 chuts. For locals don't pay anything to get in. I really like this Art Deco colonial furniture. Here's some of the clothes that he wore and books that have been written about Bojok Aung San. I like this air moving through the buildings. These are flowers that we have in Tucson, so I thought that was interesting to see. This pool or pond on the property is tragic because one of the children died there, the brother of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. That night we had dinner at a Thai restaurant with my other uncle. Here's my uncle Tong, and then this is at the end is my uncle Pakup and all his children. Here's a shot of the toilet with the sprayer, of course. Next we were riding out of town. There's a bell that was stolen from Shwedagon Paya and was buried in this river, and there's several attempts been made to recover that bell. So here we are on the road to a museum of ethnic houses. This is outside of Rangoon, and I thought it was interesting to see how the changes to a little bit more rural area on the way out. There's a cow in the road here. This is a Buddhist school. You can see that the people around here are wearing green longjis with white shirts, which is a standard student uniform. So we finally arrived at the Museum of Ethnic Houses. Here's the map of all the different displays of the houses they have. Here's restaurants misspelled, the entrance, and the first thing you see is the Bama or pagoda. There's lots of stray dogs everywhere in Burma. This is the Zo or Chin display, although none of these things are really to do with our culture, but they're pretty. This is a statue of a Miten, which is an indigenous water buffalo to the area. We actually see that one of those later. So here's the Zo Chin house. Here the hornbill, which is the state bird of the Chin state, and the house from the outside. This is where the smithing would be done. Some plants. Everything about this house is made for warfare. The steps on the right lead to a platform where the eldest son sleeps to watch out for enemies coming. And if you notice, under the main door is a large piece of wood that protects them from being shot at. Here's the main hearth and some weavings. This is the toilet. It's just a hole in the floor. And also the elderly get a special toilet inside to have a little privacy. Here are the traditional textiles made by the Zo people. And here's another picture of the hearth. So the parents sleep on one side, guests sleep on another, and children sleep on another. This is a shield made of leather. They call this a long chair. These cutouts are wearing Hakka clothing. These are all of the sub-tribes identified of the Zo. Here's some indigenous plants. Another view of the house. This statue is of a woman carrying a basket that's supported by a strap on her head. Next is the Kachin house. The Kachin and the Chin are closely related culturally. Next are the Shan, which are on the border of China and therefore have a lot of Chinese influence. This is for fishing. They are also well known for opium production. Next are the Kaya or Karenni people, who are south of the Shan. The Moken people live only on boats and do not have houses, and they have almost completely disappeared. Here's a dog who adopted us for a part of the way, one of the many feral dogs in Burma. In front of us is my cousin, 12P, who's visiting from Thailand. And if you can see the woman that was walking in front, she's wearing a Hello Kitty dress. These are some feral dog puppies. This is a Bama house, and these are very rare. My aunt said that she remembers as a child a friend of hers living in a Bama house. So the Bama are the major ethnic groups, which is mostly Buddhist, and live in Rangoon. So this is the a Mon house. That was a birthing room. These are the Rakhine or Rakhine. Next, we went to a Burmese shop where we sort of point and picked at what we wanted to have, which is a very nice rice and vegetable lunch for me. Here's my friend Chiri Zahao with her baby. She does a lot of work on behalf of women and Chin women. This is my cousin's house, which is considered a modern apartment. This is a kitchen with a sink on the left and one on the bottom. Here's a food vendor. Next, we took a little ride in this rickshaw, paid somebody 50 cents to ride us a few blocks. Up the staircase here is my aunt's house. Her husband was a colonel, so she has a pretty good pension, and it's a nice apartment. I like this factory. It has very modern look and clean lines. So now we're on our way to the airport, and we're going to fly to Kalemio. I like this sign because it had a counter misspelled. But here's a service advertising to wrap your luggage in saran wrap, which I always wondered how people did that, and turns out you can pay someone. Lots of products packed into the airport, very European and American products. They were doing an exercise here with a fire emergency. So now we're flying to Calais on the border of Chin State. And it's just, the airport is basically just this building and an airstrip. Here's another video at double speed. Mostly people ride scooters, and there are some cars, but the road is mostly taken over by the scooters. Here's our hotel that we're pulling into, the Majesty Hotel, which was actually very luxurious and comfortable. We had, this is the lobby, and the staff leave their shoes out of the meeting rooms. So this is the family room that we had. Here's my aunt, Vong Kai. All of the walls are tile because in the tropical weather everything produces mold. Here's a nice dinner we had, and American liquor and American soda also available. This is just a convenience store. This is my cousin Ankap's house, and he's married to my other cousin, Nam Mang Chiang. This is their kitchen. They have a washer and dryer and a little bit of room to grow mustard greens. This is their bathroom and, of course, the toilet. This is the bedroom, which is just pretty much open. My cousin Uncut makes deliveries with this truck, but I think it needs some repairs. This is a view down the street. We headed out to my aunt Wong Kai's house. This is the advertisement for my uncle's tea that he grows in the hills. So she's presenting my husband here with a puan. Every house has a sign that says which church the members belong to. And here's the toilet. This pump has to be manually pumped. I think Ankap's house had a electrical pump. It's a nice little balcony and the back of the house. A good sized garden with some vegetables drying. Here's coal. They use coal. They use gas. They use electricity on their phones. That's every source of energy being used. Every form of energy. Here's a coat that my mother left in Burma 40 years ago that my aunt still has. Here's the sewing machine that they're still using, one of those Singer ones that you pump with your foot to make the needle go. And they served us a nice little meal here. We went to our driver's home, which is a brand new, very modern house, tile inside and out. But they always have all of the furniture pushed against the wall. Next, we went to see a relative friend of ours who's building this resort. He's a retired doctor, and he gave me some probiotics for my stomach, which had been upset for a couple days. And here's the toilet. And chickens. Next, we went to see a friend of my uncle's who's a dentist. So this is what it's like to go to a dentist in Kalemio. Here are all his utensils and tools that he uses, and he also fabricates his own crowns. At this table, he says you have to send out for dentures. This is their bathroom. This is my auntie's house. She is in her 90s and just had a mastectomy, but she's doing great. Then we stopped at the tea shop, where you usually have a corn or rice soup. Next stop was my uncle's house, who hosted us when we were in Burma when I was a baby. Cup. Here's the kitchen again, and the shower, and a very nice backyard. I think he's growing some fruit in his yard there. Here I am at the border to Chin State, and then we visited Kalay University and got a nice view of the mountain. Next, we stopped by at my uncle's friend's house, who is a medical doctor. This is the exam table. My Nuno brought us a rice snack, which you can basically just eat the whole thing. Next, we stopped at my cousin's kids' boarding school. I've been helping to fund this tuition for my two cousins, who are doing really well there. Here's a passion fruit. Next morning, we stopped and had what they call platter, which is an Indian dish. Oh, they're showing the flash there, which I thought was funny. Platter is deep fried dough with egg inside and beans. Very hearty, satisfying breakfast. Here's the tea, all the cans of condensed milk used to make the tea. So our next trip was to go from Kalemio, drive through the mountains to Tidem. Here we are on the road. So we're starting to ride up into the mountains, and the road is pretty nice at this point. We're getting some real elevation here. You can see the nice Kalay Valley. Next, we saw some workers on the road, and these were all over the road up to the top. They live in these tents and have basically everything they need, including having their children there. We're heading up into the clouds. It's a beautiful vista there. Next, you can see a lot of the mudslides, the landslides that happened in 2015. There were 5 days of rain. After the third day, there started to be cracks and landslides. This is the reason they moved Tamdayang to a new location. So the road's starting to get a little muddy here, some more mudslides. And here we reached a town, and you can, I don't know if you can see, but the houses basically just drop off the road. They're built right to the edge of the road. So you can see here that there's sort of steps down and then scaffolding that they build, and they put those posts right into the ground, and all of the harvest is done right straight down the mountain. There's really no horizontal space. Here's a restaurant we went to that belonged to some cousins of mine, and we got to go into the kitchen in the back here. And they're drying their clothes on the porch, which has also a beautiful view, and mudslides can be seen there. Every now and then you see some piece of technology somebody left. Lots of Christian iconography and sayings everywhere since they were converted by missionaries in the late 1800s. Here's another toilet, just a squat toilet with the pot holding water to flush. The next town we went to show some nice cherry blossoms and a restaurant, again from some relatives, where we went back into the kitchen. This is how they store their food. I like this kitchen because above the fire is this opening, and also another opening to the left there. You can see the smoke is moving out, and it's not smoky where we're sitting. This is how meat is stored, and also vegetables.
Okay, so this village, most of the people are from Cossack. It's all gone. So they use these scooters to. So they plant the mustard greens on the hills like that, and then they take it on the scooters down to Kalimio.
This is some kind of business. This is own business, okay?
Right. And then why did the people come from Cossack to here?
Oh, it's a better life. Yeah.
Because you're on the highway, or?
Oh yeah, it's on the highway, so there's
Okay.
no highway go through, so this is the much more opportunity for
Right.
easier living.
So is Cossack therefore much smaller, or is it still
Smaller.
just?
Yeah, we're gonna see.
Yeah. No. I mean, is it the too many people are leaving?
Yeah, living. See.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were a child, it was like about around 200 houses.
Yeah.
Now it's about around only 40.
40. Yeah.
See, everybody
All the
gone.
villages like
Yeah.
that, right?
It migrate to
Yeah.
young.
Well, everybody goes to
Goes to,
where the
yeah,
food
the
is.
better
Yeah.
place.
Everywhere we saw pigs being kept like this in small little pens. This is down to a government compound.
So up there is the highway, and we walk down here just a short ways. This is a government bungalow.
Belong to the public work department.
Oh.
No.
This meeting place for government officials is halfway between Tidim, where we're headed, and Hakka, the Chin State capital. Here's the road that we're traveling on right now, and beautiful view of the mountains, but with some mudslides.
So you can see the farming here.
I zoomed in on the woman working on this hillside. It's so steep she has to put her basket below her, which is hard to capture on film. We stopped and had a quick rice soup and corn soup with feral dogs and some animal skins. Nobody could tell me what the animals were. Next we came by Prayer Mountain, which also had meeting rooms. These men are actually praying. Everyone knew us there and wanted to shake our hands. From the view of the Prayer Mountain you could see the cell phone tower in the middle of nowhere. Next we came to Fort White, which was a famous British outpost, but was destroyed in World War II. Fort White overlooks the Sian Valley, where the 5 villages make up the Sian clan, or the Suantak clan. Facing the other side of Fort White is a World War II cemetery of British soldiers in that clearing there in the middle. These next 2 pictures show the landslides. And finally we come to Tidim, where my uncle has a house, which we'll go and see. We stopped here at the Asian restaurant, but ended up not eating here because not enough of us were hungry. They have private rooms. They say zoo and beer is not served here. Zoo, of course, being the rice wine. My Uncle Pinot still owns this house on the left. We'll come back there. This is a house he was in charge of building when he was on the city council. We stopped and ate a little. This is the standard way to decorate a restaurant or a house. Pictures of flowers and landscapes. Here's an old hydrochloric acid barrel being used as a water container. Here's a woman working on the side of the road, and another woman carrying a heavy post with a strap on her head. This Polytechnic Center didn't have many computers, but did have classrooms and, of course, toilets. When the mudslides happened in 2015, the government built these houses as shelter for the refugees. We were in search of a display of a traditional Zo house and ended up on this compound, which I can only say belonged to a Christian cult. They have their own messiah and their own version of Zo history. This house in some ways was more authentic than the one we had seen in Yangon. For example, there was an elephant head, a skull on the front. You could see the long chairs and also the door that we saw before.
The parents band and is brandy.
This was a nice display of the changing clothing styles of the Zo. On the left, it starts with the longest ago traditional clothing and what they were 100 years ago and what they are now. Their interpretation is a bit different of the styles. We headed back to Tidim, where we stayed at a guest house which had electricity from 6 to 10 p.m. at night and hot water.
Okay, this is the hotel in Tidim. Here's our room. This is the toilet with the sprayer. And here is the shower, because you have a wet bathroom. Like the whole thing is a shower. And I think there's hot water. We kind of doubted there was going to be, but there's a metal pipe coming from the other direction is the blue pipe, and from up there, so I'm thinking that's a hot water heater up there somewhere. The walls are all tile. And we're going to share a room. And this here is the lap of luxury in Tidim.
Google always knows where we are. Here's the view from the roof of the hotel. You can see the clouds are below us slightly, and there's one more set of stairs that goes one flight up, which goes to the solar panels for the water heater. And here we're coming back through. You can see everything is just again off the side of the mountain. We had a feast that night with my relatives, and one of whom speaks English. She's there sitting by the coal heater, and some of the cute little girls, and here we all together as a group. Coming back to this book my father wrote in 1986 on the Zo history of our people, my uncle Pano arranged to have it translated. This is the man who did the translation. He's a retired teacher. He worked 4 months full-time and hand-wrote 2 of these notebooks full of the translation. Here are the beaten-up books he used to reference the dictionaries. We went back to my uncle's house, where some of our relatives are living now, and discussed where to store the books of the translations. Here's a transformer. Some of this furniture has been here for 50 years. It is believed that antlers would protect the house from fire. Here's some more of this awesome furniture. This is the water pumping station. And just down the road is what looks like a shack, but is actually a hospital where my aunt and uncle lived for 7 years. Now that we've reached Tidim, we are heading down to Hakka. We're going to cross over the Manipur River and go through Phalam. Back on the road, this was a Sunday, so we stopped at our cousin's house because all of the Christian restaurants are closed. We stopped here for a snack. And of course to say hello and to use the toilet. As we continued to Hakka, we were getting higher and higher till about 5,000 feet. We passed many work areas like this one, where the BURMA people here are working with their hands and primitive tools to build the road. You can see in the back there's a little boy with his mother. Next, we're about to cross the Manipur River right before Phalam. This sign says "Welcome to Phalam." My father lived here as a teenager when my grandfather was a health inspector. Here they built a tennis court on the only horizontal ground they could find. Since it was Sunday, we ended up eating at the Buddhist place. Here's the Burmese menu, and you can see the owner's children did their monk service. Here's a bottle opener and also some wine that my uncle brought with him, made locally. So we're leaving Phalam, and on the street we see pigs, and here's a Mithan. She's really scared of the car. She's got her calf behind her. The Mithan and the hornbill are indigenous to this area, and the hornbill is the state bird and seen on the Chin state flag, but they're disappearing and you see them less and less. My mother said she never saw one. Of course, that was 40 years ago, and now they're even more rare. So finally we make it to Haka. You can see there's pine trees, which shows how high we are. Of course, here's the toilet. And these are government residences. We'll get to see one of those later. As we're driving into Haka, you can see it's quite a sprawling city. Here are government buildings, government residences. Here's the hotel that we're staying at and the front lobby. Our room, again, we got a family room, which is nice. It had its own sink in the room. This is the shared toilet and shower. There's a squatting toilet, and out on the balcony is a Western style toilet. We made it just before dusk to a famous lookout point. You can look at the whole city. This plaque shows the history of Haka, mostly about the missionaries. We then went to a Burmese restaurant, since every place was closed, and had to wait a long time to eat. But it was good, and then it was night, and the next morning we headed out to look at the graves of the first missionaries to the Chin Hills. Here's A.E. Carson. He died of appendicitis about 10 years in. His wife, Laura, took over. They happened to be having this conference at the time that we were there. We stopped by and looked at the huge church. Here they're using the traditional textiles to collect the tithing. Here's a hospital in Haka, which looks pretty nice. We stopped here for lunch. You can see the basket on the bottom right. My aunt Nikai showed us how this would be carried by someone. We had a nice meal. It's the first time I could eat in a few days. Since the day before was Sunday, it was all very quiet. So it was very nice to see all the stores open. Here are children going to school with their green longjis again. There were so many students at one point that we had to stop the car. This is how you get gas in the third world. They store everything in barrels. And we got a very modern looking pump. The price is about the same as in the U.S. They said 4,000 kyat a gallon, which is about, I don't know, $3.50. And that's for the premium. My uncle's school friend is the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation in the Chin State, so we stopped by his residence. His wife is also my aunt's second cousin. No matter how nice the house, the gate is still a good place to dry your blankets. Here's inside the house. Here's a Methan head, and this used to be used to carry gunpowder. Next, we're heading back to Kalemio, but on the low road, not over the same way, and it's much lower elevation. Here, these horses are carrying rice up the mountains. We stopped by on the side of the road to use the bathroom at this convenience store. You can see there's detergent and brushes and whatever else you might need. They're growing papaya down the road, and a pig, and any horizontal space to grow mustard greens. Here's somebody bringing his wares to the market. Here we go back over the Manipur River, but down the low road. This was all flooded in 2015. Here's some more workers. This is an example of the traditional pipe that would bring water down from the mountain into that trough where they would store water. We stopped in a small town to eat. There was some animal skins hung up. Nobody could tell me really much about these. One of them is a wild cat. Maybe another one was kind of a beaver. We had some ramen here. On the low road, there's lots of little waterfalls. Here's a bridge where I was sure we'd die. We had to wait here for about 20 minutes for him to clear the road for us to go by. He just kept dumping dirt down the side of the road, which seemed very precarious to me. And suddenly we were back in the valley in Kalemio. We stopped by at my cousin's house where the kids were watching Chinese action movies subtitled into Burmese, just like anywhere else in the world. Then we had dinner with our friend. I like this toothpick dispenser so much they sent it home with me. The hotel was having an event with a traditional dance. We went back to get some more plata for breakfast. I was impressed by these guys' dexterity at making the dough. I wanted to take one of these home with me, the little stools that everyone sits on. So we had to special order it. Next, we stopped by my auntie's textile store where I picked up some bags for my kids. My cousin looked at me and said, "She looks like one of us." My cousins piled into the car to make the 3-hour drive up to Tamdayang. Here's an ox cart in the road. The bridge got flooded out on the left, so we took the one on the right. Here we're still in the valley. As we started gaining altitude, the road was worse. It had been flooded out the week before, so at some point we had to stop and get out of the car. We're on our way to Tamdayang, and we had to get out of the car because the road is so bad. Okay, so now we're walking a bit. Tamdayang is on the ridge over there, the far ridge. Not the very far ridge, the one before that. There's some houses, which is like 7 miles from here or so. So we're not going to keep walking. We'll just catch up to the car and then walk somewhere. Then drive somewhere. And Nuno is somewhere down the road. Here's a nice bamboo grove and beautiful mountain flowers. We had to stop here because they were drying the rice on the road. And then we made it to the town right before Tamdayang where everyone stopped and shook our hands and gave us a nice meal and ate together, the whole town. Here's one of the many times I thought we'd dive. You can see right out the window the road just drops straight down right under the tires. Here's my uncle's middle school, and as we're driving finally into Tamdayang, a total travel time of 38 hours, 23 hours by plane, 5 hours by car. Here's my uncle's greenhouse that he built just in the last 2 years since the mudslides, and a pretty view from his house. Here's the rain gutters where they're collecting the water, solar panels, a nice bay window, and a poster of my sister and father. Here's the kitchen where they keep the fire burning all the time, and also the area next to it, which is a cleaning area. You can see that pipe coming out from under the fire provides hot water anytime. Here's the workshop where they make the tea. Okay.
So this is
Cook it in the...
the steam.
Oh, yeah. So it
so
cooks
cook
it.
it. And they grind here.
Next step is to grind it?
They grind it.
Okay. Very interesting.
That time they dry it here.
And then they lay it on there and dry
They
it.
dry it.
They don't lay it on the floor ever?
Oh,
Because I think I've seen pictures of big, on the floor. This is very
so
interesting.
modernized.
Yeah. All natural.
They put here.
Yeah.
The raw rice,
So
the
interesting.
smile.
Yeah, everything, huh? Lungdam. Here's the memorial for my father and sister and where their ashes are buried. After seeing the memorial, we took a walk around the plantation and the village, so you can see some of the tea bushes here. Yeah, one little tiny house over there.
Okay.
That's the old Tamdayang.
Yeah.
They plant and grow these elephant yams to sell down in Kalemio. Here's the temporary new school they're building with the Japanese government. There's a more permanent building out back. I asked this family how they keep the kids from falling off the platform, and they just laughed at me. They said they just know. Back in the house, we kept warm with one of these coal heaters, but the cell phones were working great. There's a tower just down the hill from my uncle's house. Google always knows where we are. They gave me a couple more traditional puans as presents. Here we are getting served dinner from the floor. The cats get to eat rice soup. There's no cat food in the Chin Hills, but the cats survive on rice. We ate a bit better with some vegetables I didn't recognize. This was kind of like an okra, but full of seeds, but it was very delicious. My cousins and their kids made themselves comfortable. I had a little friend snuggle up with me here. And I was trying to go to sleep, and everybody else was watching Chinese action movies. Here's a transformer and a solar panel, a small one. It was time for my cousin's children to go to school. These two girls made such an impression on me. They seemed so smart. I wanted to take them back with me to hang out with my kids. My uncle has 17 cattle, which we got to watch go out to graze in the morning. I like the sound of the bells. Here they are at double speed. Here comes the baby. I asked whether they had a male and a bunch of females. He said it's not that complicated. They just put them together and they make more. Here they are, the cattle and the children off to school. On their way home from school, it's their job to collect the cattle back in. We walked through town a bit and looked at some of the other houses. Most of them are relatives. Here you can see some of the blue pipe that's bringing water to the houses. Here's more cultivation on the side of the mountain, and this picture shows the burned parts that forest slashed and burned. Lots of wild marigolds and other beautiful plants growing, and also the ubiquitous chickens. Here's the temporary new church and the bell.
So this is a rice paddy, and the way they do it is they cut off the trees, slash and burn. So they cut off the trees, burn it, and then put the seeds in, and the next thing you know, you have rice.
I asked whether they flood the fields like I've seen pictures like this, and they said, no, it's not that complicated. You put the seeds in the ground and it grows. We passed this woman smoking a traditional pipe, which smelled wonderful. She's also carrying a basket with a strap on her head and a yoke around the neck.
See the clouds moving.
We found a UNICEF tent hanging on one of the fences, evidence of the work that they had been doing there.
This is all part of the Padal's tea.
My grandmother started this tea plantation and worked very hard experimenting to find a good hybrid that would grow well in these hills. These are harvested about twice a year, and only the new leaves are used. Here's a pretty cherry grove. This seller rode hundreds of miles to sell his carpets up in the hills. Here's some wild edible peas that I didn't recognize what they were. This man is 92 years old, still living in the Chin Hills.
So this is a water supply. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, it's just a pipe and there's water flowing in there. See that? The pipe comes down and feeds the houses here on the mountain. It's built by UN Habitat.
We walk back down to the rest of the village. This is rice drying and elephant yam seeds. I like these plants because these are all desert plants that we also have growing in Arizona. Here's some edible beans. We had our last breakfast in Tumdayang. I got some tea from the plantation to take back home with me. We made one more stop at the memorial and headed back down the dangerous road, and suddenly we were back in Kalemyo. Here's another bridge we had to cross, which seemed very dangerous to me. One last night in Kalemyo, I peeked into some of the shops and found American and German products. This was the buffet at the last morning at the hotel. Here's my Nikai showing me the traditional hairstyle from this old picture. This is how they used to wear their hair.
ก็ข้าวย่อมต้มเอาบ่สิต้มเลยงั้นนี่ค่ะต้มหมดเรียกบ่เทต้มหมดเรียกพอเด็กข้าววันคัดเสียหม้ออีเทคจะตันมากกินได้บ่เสียงหยงหม้อแต่เสร็จนี่รู้ได้ที่ได้ข้าวเอาวันกินกันบ้างกว่าแม่แม่ก่อนจะเสร็จจุ่มกระเทยเยี่ยวแม่ ตะตะมาเห็นมุ้งเงียดอะไรอีโยเกี่ยวน้องเต้หิตเจ๊เจ๊ปอดขัดนี่ยังกับก้อยหน้าให้หัวมันเลยเจ๊เอาปอน้องท่าตำกับปีเลยเจ๊ก่อบ่มก็ง่ายอยู่นู่นกันเลยง่ายอยู่เจ๊เนี่ยเกี่ยวน้องอีโยเกี่ยวน้องเต้
You just have to make it really tight, huh? Yeah.
It's too short.
The wrapping is too short.
Yeah.
Well,
My grandma.
uh-huh.
My grandma.
She used to do that.
Yeah.
We got the copies of the Tiddim translation of my father's book from the printers and went to look at some of the places that would be distributing it, including mostly Christian literature books. This man just finished his PhD in Germany, so I was able to speak German to him. One of my aunts gave me this traditional material in silk, and one of my cousins did an excellent job sewing it into a dress for me. Here my aunties are trying to put my hair into the traditional style, but it was too short and too thick. One last meal before I headed out to the airport. Here's an iron we'd use in a museum, but they still use by putting coal in. Here's a picture of my father's brother Suakang with his wife and 2 children. The little boy there is Onkup, who's my cousin whose house we're in. Now it's time to leave Calais and take a few parting pictures. This is a TV repair place and a convenience store and a cell phone store. I'm back at the Calais airport. They have a nice little store that's selling the traditional cloths. The plane finally arrived, and I got this shot from the airplane of the mudslides below. On the flight they served us this bread, which I was excited about because I haven't seen bread in ages, but then it turned out there was chicken baked inside of it. Back in Rangoon for the night, and the next day I met with my uncle and his family for a quick meal of noodles. My uncle is proposing a hydroelectric project in the Chin Hills with a Norwegian company, which will be a huge project. I'm proud to see he's calling his company Suantak Enterprises, so I feel like I'm also a part of it. I stayed the night at the YMCA in Rangoon, which sounds nice, but this is how it looks. And the sheets were clean, but the walls looked like they needed some paint already from 40 years ago. Of course, the bathroom and the toilet. The printer dropped off 50 copies of my father's translation, so I used that in my suitcase and hand carried the baskets. My flight didn't leave until midnight the next day, so Michael and I spent the day in Rangoon. When the newspapers are first published in the morning, people come to this corner to read them for free and then put them back. Not far from the YMCA is the house that we lived in Rangoon when I was a baby. Next we went to a tea shop for breakfast. This is a somewhat famous place, and they have lots of different Burmese food, like this fried dish. I was able to take some pictures of some other people's dishes. Street vendors where the food looks delicious, but I'm too afraid to try it. They also left breakfast in my room. This is Sulepaya in downtown Rangoon, and a park, the only park in Rangoon. Next we stopped at the community center where Michael does some of his work. This is a place where companies or individuals can rent office space to do their work. Here's the kitchen. This isn't a high rise. There's a competition by Raymond Kurzweil that's called First, and the Burmese team last year won 6th place with this robot. Here's a view of the city from the skyscraper, showing some of the satellite dishes on the old buildings. We went back down to the street level and passed by some shops. This is a famous huge Anglican church. The Pope happened to have come by while I was there, but I missed him. He, of course, was at a Catholic church. We went back to Bojoke Market and saw the sign. I bought a few souvenirs here. Then we went to the railroad station built by the British. There's no current way to buy tickets except to go to this ticket counter. That's one of Michael's ideas, is to provide an app for this. Here the times are listed in English. Here's the complaint center, which doesn't inspire much confidence, and also water fountains that promise filtered water, but I'm skeptical. The tourist office isn't very inspiring either. But the seats were nice and the trains looked nice inside. The subways have updated signs. Here's an old sign and here's the new sign, which looks very modern. Now we're traveling outside of the station back into downtown Rangoon. It was very hot. I had an avocado juice, which was really delicious. And then we stopped by at an aunt's house whose father was the brother of my grandfather. She mostly wanted to talk about how great my father was, of which I needed no convincing. Here we are with the rest of her family and also my pickup. On the way out, we got a glimpse of this high-tech electronics store, which looks like any electronics store anywhere else in the world. We had one more meal with my pickup and Michael and headed out to the airport. I didn't notice the Christmas tree in the back until I looked at the picture. Here's our last goodbye. And I'm off on my way to Seoul to Incheon Airport. This airport is well equipped for long international layovers. There are shops and entertainment such as the K-pop zone, and most importantly, there is the nap zone where I slept for 2 hours and then had a wonderful surprise of getting a free shower with free toiletries, including a hairdryer and a very modern bathroom with a final shot of a toilet on this trip. Then I hung out here for a while. There's even a hotel and a lounge to rest in. I was shocked by this sea of cars, which I hadn't seen in weeks. And finally, I'm back home.